Hello again, everybody. Welcome back for episode 2 with our lovely, lovely Jessie. Welcome back, Jess. Has anything changed in your life in the last 20 minutes that you'd like to share?
So much, Chantelle. I mean, I had a bunch of harassers who were asking for my receipts and proof of my abuse. I really don't think they would want that proof, but they'll get it. I've asked for it all to be made public, but I just have to laugh sometimes. It's, they're like, you better make sure you have receipts for the accusations you're making, and, better have 2 witnesses, and they're like, is your training partner going to testify with you? People, you better believe I've got more than 2 witnesses on some of this stuff. So it's like crazy. Yeah.
I really think a lot of it is, I always like to look for a deeper meaning in things. And really, when people behave like that, it's like they have such a battle trusting their own selves. They have such a battle dealing with what is truly going on. It's almost like they want to know, but yeah, you are queen whistleblower, and they want to stop you because their own fears won't allow them to face what has really been going on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's like they don't even think about, the people who've had to investigate or who have come across some of even the current crimes, because, the things that happened to me were not just childhood, but the people that I've, who are high level in this system are still going with their crimes. And, one of the hardest moments of my life was having to sit across the table from one of the gentlemen who, was privy to one of those crimes in my life. And, he, as tears were rolling down his eyes, he was just like, my God, what a mess, and that's all he could say was, my God, what a mess. And that was about the death of, children. And, he got to see what I got to see almost every day of my life for the first 10 years, so it's like people just can't even imagine how bad it is. And there's some things that I've just put up that boundary that I give enough what I've had to give to commit people or to convict them of the crimes. But there's some things where I just set up that boundary and say, you don't need to know everything that's in my head. You don't need to know everything I witnessed. And I'm just going to say, you know what? That's a grace. That's God's grace to those people, abusers in my life, is that the full extent of what they have done, the world will never know. And that's God's grace to them. The world will know they're guilty. The world will know that they were evil and horrific, but their grace is that the world doesn't see how evil they were,
Extent. But at the end of the day, it can never be undone, and they will always know, and God will always know. And,
that's right.
There is, and that's between,
and it's between God, yeah. They will be judged. God's not going to, I guess God's just going to take care of it, is what we'll say. The Lord knows the full extent of every evil intention of their heart, and the Lord will judge that. And, his judgment will be righteous, and it will be just,
the gentleman you spoke of now, that you said looked at this and said, my gosh, what a mess. Was he in the system with you? Was he a perpetrator?
No, he was evidential witness to, like what I still get heads up from people in the system when they're going to commit crimes sometimes. So, there's individuals who respond to that and investigate and, who catch these people in the act of doing this stuff now so that prosecutions can happen. So.
Do you find from exactly what you're speaking of now, getting tip-offs about crimes being committed, obviously still having some kind of intel on what's going on in the system right now, from what you're seeing, is it crumbling? Are things moving in a more positive direction? I know that it has to break down, and it's almost like it's got to crumble. And that crumbling is always a very scary process, not just for the ones who've committed the evil and the atrocities, but for the world. You know, all of our lives have to change. Everything has to change in the way that we do. So do you see that things are making a definite shift?
Absolutely, yeah. The old guard, as I would know it, you know, has been demolished. So, you know, the dark side of the system has fallen, and you know, that's evidenced. People can go back in records and just look at the deaths of individuals the past couple years. You know, many of the high level individuals that I named are gone. You know, Boo, who sadly I like to taunt, you know, Boo, Michael Aquino, you know, Michael Carcock, the high priest who was over the Chicago area, Thomas Brady, you know, the list goes on and on, Gloria Vanderbilt. And so people can look at those deaths, you know, even the Rothschilds, look at how many high level business Rothschild men have died this past year. You know, so definitely there's good military who has been, you know, overseeing a lot of that stuff. You know, I believe that Hillary is gone. I believe that Bill is gone. But, you know, what I see happening then is the light side of the system has stepped forward. All of the former heads of the 13 family lines who were dark side have been removed. Many of those individuals have died, and now we've got the light side sitting in those 13 seats. So huge shift. Yeah, I definitely see a lot of things happening and see things going towards, you know, what we would call the end time events that, you know, have been foretold about. So.
When you mention the Rothschilds now, and I know this is not a Q&A, but I can't resist. That 1-year-old little Rothschild who is
big brown
now,
eyes, yes.
Yeah, brown eyes, the one that you carried around. I have no doubt that he must have entered the system and had similar type experiences to what you guys were experiencing when his time came. Is he around? Where is he? Is he one of those that's left the earth plane?
Yeah, I believe he's around. You know, I think that people have seen him. You know, so I would just keep your eyes out. So
I do believe I know who that one is, by the way.
and
I've,
you do.
yes, I've seen recent pictures of him, and I've got to say, his eyes look incredibly sad. His eyes, if you look into his eyes, he's got the saddest eyes as far as what I can see. It really is.
Yeah, there's definitely connections, you know, and he, I guess we'll say, you know, a connection to him, part of his circle. Several of the females in that circle have attempted to come forward. One of them is Paris Hilton, who has been working to try to reform abuse and crimes that have been going on at summer camps or, you know, type of recovery or camps where kids are going for bad behavior. So she's come out about her abuse and stuff in the system. And I've talked about her grandfather, Barron, who sat in one of the council seats. So there's a lot of interconnections. There's a lot of movements of the hierarchy kid survivors who are trying to come forward and share about their abuse now. So very encouraging.
I was really, actually, that was something I wanted to ask you as well, is that and I'm well aware, and just for the viewers, the reason why we speak without mentioning names is because right now we'll mention that Jessie will mention the names that she can mention. It's that simple. Are you noticing that, and I'm also just referring to sort of high level people in the system, are any of them shifting sides into the light from what you've seen? Are there any like of those high level whistleblowers? And of course, I'm dying like heck that it might be Elon Musk. And I know Elon Musk is a gray horse right now. No one really knows which side of the field he's playing on. But of course,
Nobody really knows.
Yes, I would love to see Elon as a good one, as someone that's taken and done what you've done, basically, taken that and turning it around. I would love that more than anything to see.
There definitely is. There's several, I'll just say several very high level hierarchy kids or individuals who have been part of the system who are coming forward with their full testimonies. So it is encouraging, to see. And a lot of us, there's been a collaboration of stories. So it's not just one person telling about an event or individuals who are involved in the system or who have committed crimes. There's many who have come forward now who are working with the good guys. And with that said, it's not just that these people get to switch sides and then, get off scot-free from the crimes that they have been involved in. Everybody is held accountable, and, there are no deals. Everybody is responsible. And, but we need to be in prayer because, there needs to be a special grace for those who, it's hard enough to make that change because this is not just, a physical thing. We're talking, there's a spiritual battle that when these people switch and turn and start doing what's right in the Lord's eyes, Satan's entire army comes against them. It's not just people throwing death threats. Whatever demons they've been connected to will continue to attack them, try to pull them back into the system, make demands on them. Many of them lose a lot of, their possessions, belongings. They have to leave everything behind just to give their story. So, think about that. These people have been chosen for positions that they've been established in. This has been their livelihood. And they have to walk away and give everything up in order to, to come out and to share their story. So, we really need to keep them in prayer because it's not an easy thing. And for many, it's much easier just to not go against the grain, to stay in the system and to get your consequences anyway. Or they'll commit suicide because those are the easier routes for them to take rather than entering that fight and putting their life on the line and the pain, to bring their story forward. So,
and not just their lives, as you know, it's the loved ones, and it's the threat of your family, your kids, your siblings, your parents.
Well, and a lot of times you'll have the family will turn on you if, because when you're sharing your secrets, it also includes your family members or your circle members. So, a lot of times they'll get shunned, they'll be called crazy. They'll send social workers or other people to, try to convince you that you have a health issue or mental health, that the things that you're claiming are in your head. So
Tom speaks a lot about that. That's the kind of those are the kind of antics that they were pulling on Tom Althouse and still do. So That's insane. I mean, it's just, wow, the lengths
I mean,
to which
yeah,
people
these
go.
guys are peaches, let me tell you. Like, I literally had one that um she came to our house and, you know, basically said that because I like it was claiming, you know, they knew, like, I'll just say the law enforcement in the area I was in knew I was working against trafficking. So they sent the social worker to talk to me. And she's like, well, she's like, you know, that does happen, but it's not a big organized thing. And I'm concerned that you're having some mental health issues. And I, what they wanted was they wanted me to show them my federal information. And I told them, no, I'm not going to show you that. And what the Lord reminded me was that I could show them some of the different states that I've worked with. So I pulled up one of them and showed her the email correspondences between me and one of the representatives of that state. Now, after she saw it with the pictures and the evidence that was going between us, me and this other state, she looked at me and she's like, I am just concerned that you're having a mental health moment. And I said, are you kidding me? I just showed you the evidence of trafficking and, you know, sexual exploitation of children in this state, and you're pulling that. I was like, goodbye. You
Wow.
know, like, I'm not the one having a mental health moment. Like, you know, so, but they'll do stuff like that. And they, with their words, they try to get you, you know, to come in and to talk with their special person, you know, and it's all to gather information. Like, they want to know
Information.
what evidence does, you know, the people who are working against that stuff in their area have. And they, you
Mm.
know, they're pretty much information gatherers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, which slides nicely into our main topic for the day, which is really spotting the infiltrators, because I think
Yeah.
at this point in time, I mean, it's just been such a awakening journey. I mean, I've just observed since we've started this channel how many people have awoken, followed their God-given path. It's just beautiful to see on so many levels. However, of course, we also, I mean, if we're just even looking at alternative media right now, there's so much nonsense going on in there as well, Jess. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
so many supposed truthers, and just, you know, they might give you 80% truth and then 20% nonsense, so which confuses everyone. So really, again, divide and conquer. You know, who do you support, who don't you? Oh, well, he's a liar. No, he's not. He's a bad guy. He's a good guy. You know, it's all of this divide and conquer all the time in every area that you know, these guys try and get in. So from your experience, how do we spot the plants, in the, let's say, call it the truther communities, you know, the main, these big channel hosts and stuff? How do we spot them? What are the telltales? What would be the qualities they need in order for the cabal to put them as a front face? Okay. And not just as the truthers, but let's say in your family environment, could be in your family circle, your church circle, your work environment. Within the family, yes, you know, we know by now some kids are actively programmed while others are there for the cover life. How do you, if you are one that's there for the cover life, how do you notice that your sibling's being hurt? Maybe in a situation like, let's say, your situation. How do we know, spot our planted teachers, headmasters? How do we spot the plants within our communities? Because there's so much mistrust out there as it is, with so much going on. And of course, the most important thing is in the psychological, the medical industry, the mental health care industry, because that's a big one now with a lot of these overcomers seeking psychological support, and from psychologists and psychiatrists and things. And we know that many of these have been planted there to take people back into the system as well. So these are just a lot of questions and a lot of possibilities out there that I think it's time that we became aware of.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you'll have to re-guide me through each of those sections, but I think, you know, where I'd like to start is with the psychologist and the mental health. And I'm going to give a disclaimer that I am not against every single psychologist or mental health worker. But I have very valid experiences from my childhood where I caution every survivor that you really need to proceed carefully. You know, the first question you need to ask is, you know, how do, if they're claiming that you are struggling with a program, you know, and they have the fix for that program, you have to ask if they've never been satanically, ritually involved or abused, how do they know this information? You know, where did the information really come from? It goes back to Tavistock. You know, Tavistock was not a good thing. It was experiments and projects that were done, you know, through the 1940s, through the 60s, where, you know, basically Nazis who ran those programs were experimenting on the minds of citizens, or, you know, people in different countries, particularly of Jewish descent. So as we look into Tavistock and those programs, they continued. They brought their head scientists after World War II here into the United States. You know, I was a witness to several of those Nazi individuals who were directly involved with the US military and our government, and they continued those programs here with children. And, you know, with that said, you know, they had many different names when I was a kid. They didn't go by psychiatrist. You know, they were known as the biofeedback operators. That'd be individuals who, after the experiments, would make you sit there and give a verbal, detailed account or a drawing of your experience. And, you know, these same individuals who were engaged in the biofeedback or managing individuals who had programs, you know, were the same people who were programming children and individuals in the military. You know, they were continuing to do different programs based on, you know, the position, what those children or military people would be involved in. So, you know, I have about 10 of those therapists, we'll call them, who were directly involved with, you know, the DoD and the DIA, who oversee Central Intelligence. And those individuals were also engaged with the breeder programs that some of the military bases were participating with. So I saw horrific abuses. You know, with the breeder programs, you know, we kind of talked about the schools with Oprah on the earlier show today. But, you know, they would impregnate these girls and then, you know, would induce labor. The babies might be kept. The majority are ritually sacrificed. And, you know, the girls are very highly suppressed. They're sexually abused. You know, and I kind of hate those words. I brought that out on my Twitter the other day. We kind of lessen the crimes by using words like sexual abuse. you know, because really these girls are horrifically tortured and, you know, I mean, we can't even describe the stuff that they encounter. But with that said, you know, these girls would go through these horrible sexual traumas, and then, you know, these therapists would be put in charge of managing them. They would call it, you know, managing their mental health, but pretty much the traumas were so severe that it caused these girls to disassociate. It caused them to create alter personalities because they couldn't deal with even the memory of their abuse. And, you know, these people then would be in charge to basically oversee that these girls never came forward or publicly made known the extent of how horrific their trauma was. You know, so I believe a lot of these therapists are gatekeepers and manage and keep silent, you know, the truth about what's happened to many of these survivors. You know, I would even encourage those who, you know, some of them claim that these therapists have really helped them. Yeah, they've helped you to come to a point where you can function, but ask yourself, are you able to tell your full story unhindered, the full extent of it, or do you still have blank spots? Do you still have, you know, things that you can't talk about? You know, and how did that therapist get so darn good at managing DID and split personalities? You know, it's because they know the programs, they understand the program. And in order to understand the program, you know, you had to somehow be introduced to programming. So, you know, at the highest level of these therapists, you know, there's at least 10 I have named who, you know, were in charge of running the breeder programs and, you know, overseeing the long-term care of the girls who were part of those breeder programs and making sure that they never fully, you know, were able to speak about their situation. So, you know, I
Can
call
you
them,
tell us, have you mentioned names on these? Is there a way you can maybe expose that?
well, I
Pursue
highly
that?
come out against that. You know, people want to know more about certain connections, you know, I highly come out against the ISSTD therapists. So, yep.
Okay.
And, you know, the School of Psychology there in Chicago, that many of them are connected to, there's a lot that, you know, has gone on with those therapists. So, yeah.
Dr. Full is one, and I know we've briefly spoken about him in the past as well on this show. Dr. Full to me seems like one of those gatekeeper kind of dudes. Firstly, it would seem to me, he was introduced into the public eye by Oprah. Although I'm pretty sure not everyone who appears on Oprah's show is involved in what she does. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who don't know anything about that are guests on her show. Pretty sure about that.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at someone like Dr. Full, who's pretty much been groomed by Oprah to be the public, brilliant psychiatrist that he is, you know, and he is, let's face facts. I mean, Dr. Full's got some, if I've watched a couple of his shows, he's good. I mean, he's good the way he handles people. But there again, you're hearing about these horrendous places he's sending these young people to, women in particular, where they're being raped, they're being abused. I just look at his sons. We also looked at what's in one of his sons' houses as well. I think it's the second one. The type of remember that Mornay, we even showed some pictures of stuff of the symbolism in the house, you know, that sort of thing. What's your take on that, Dr. Full? I'd just be interested to know.
Yeah, I
That's
think we
Neil.
had said there's, a high chance that he is engaged in the system. And, I believe that a lot of those shows were made, to kind of run the narrative. They tell us who we're supposed to trust, who the so-called professionals are.
Yeah.
And the truth is that, many of these professionals are not even really professionals. They commit crimes, they, sleep their way up to the top. It's all by your connections and what you're willing to do to get those connections that get you the position or the job. How many people who, we know are part of the system have received honorary doctorates. They haven't sat there for 14 years in a classroom having to write papers every week, doing all the schoolwork. They get an honorary doctorate, and now they're professional and they can speak to certain topics, and everybody's encouraged to listen to them and told that that's the truth. And there's no questioning, because my God, how dare you question a professional? It's like, I
Exactly.
mean, some of these people, I had to deal with one of these, kind of off topic, but it's like with my shoulder surgery. I had 3 massive surgeries. My third one, I was in so much pain, like I can't do the painkillers for more than a couple days after my surgery, but it was just like over the top pain. And I was to the point where I was like, what in the world is going on with my shoulder? Like, I should not have that much pain. This was my 3rd surgery. So, the pain was way different than my other 2. So when I went in there to talk to him, his first thing was, well, I don't cater to pain med seekers. And I was like, what? I'm like, I'm not even asking you for pain meds, so I don't know where you came up with that. And I was like, I can't even take them. Did you read my chart? I can't take them. So then he's like, it was just a little hole that we fixed. It was just a little hole in your rotator. I don't know what you're complaining about. And I was like, no, you did more than just the rotator. Are you sure you're looking at the right record? That was my 2nd surgery. And he's like,
Wow.
no, I'm looking right here. And he's telling me all this stuff, right? And I said, no, you did more this time. I said, you even did stuff, you moved my bicep. And he's like, no, we didn't do that. You would have a scar underneath your armpit if we did that. And I was like, oh, you mean this scar? And it was still, a healing wound. So I show him the scar. I'm like, look, you moved my bicep. There's the scar. And he still proceeded to tell me I was wrong. And so then I finally was like, you know what? You're a dumbass. Excuse my language. I'm like, you're fired. You better not even look at my records. You better not talk to any physicians about my care. I'm done with you. You don't even know what you're talking about, and you don't have the decency to even look. You're just saying I'm wrong. You're not listening. So I fired the guy. So then I go into my physical therapist, and he's like, do you want to know what they did to your shoulder? He's like, I've got the surgical report here. And I was like, yeah. And they had removed half my collarbone. They had widened my AC joint. So literally, like, that's why I was in so much pain, was because of the bone. Like, when you cut the bone, you get bone pain. And so it was just excruciating. And they had moved my bicep, connected it to the deltoid. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And the guy was sitting there telling me it was all in my head, And I was like, what?
How is that even possible that a doctor, I mean, I understand, fine, you have several surgeries you do, you're a busy man. We all appreciate that. Thank you. But the question is, I mean, how does is he so far removed from life that he can't even remember, even when you're triggering his memory by saying, no, this, usually you go, oh, okay, sorry,
or asking questions like, are you looking at the right surgery? I've had multiple surgeries. Maybe you're looking at the second one. That one, I just had the rotator repair, so that would be right, But it just tells you, it shows you that the dissonance of these people, that they just want to feed you a narrative. They want you to go along with it. They want you to see them as the expert and, the specialist. And the scary thing is that they want to remove you from being in charge of your own care.
Exactly.
Nobody knows your body better than you. And many times, I appreciate the doctors and physicians that, as I bring forward things, they're like, oh, well, that could be valid. Let's look into that. And, they hear what I have to say. And so, even as a survivor, I would love to see more people. And again, I'm not saying stop your counseling or stop meds that you may be on. I'm definitely not saying that. But we need to not be afraid to step up and be in charge of our own healing, and to believe that the Lord will lead us and guide us and give us direction as to what is best in our healing. And we need to not be afraid to, propose to those helping us what we feel the issue is. I have a lot of experience working with psychiatrists and counselors and individuals in the mental health field. That was my specialty as a chaplain, especially in the veteran units. And I would see a lot of guided narrative where, they would say, well, this is what I feel the issue is. And all too often I would see the patient saying, okay, and accepting that, instead of wrestling with it or saying, you know what, let's talk about this more. Like, why do you feel that? Or, I don't feel that. I feel you're wrong in that. And so a lot of times, I feel that type of therapy would leave people in a place where basically they're just getting band-aids slapped on deep infected wounds. The deep wound is left hidden or covered up because, even if some of these specialists are dealing with SRA, they do tend to water down the trauma. There is a process of how they lead people through trauma work or memory work. A lot of times, these therapists will put patients into a state of hypnosis, which means that you're not dealing with that memory at a conscious level. So when you wake up, you've had therapy done on you, you don't know exactly what they've done. You don't consciously aren't aware of what you've worked through. And you go off of a narrative of what they've told you. And, that I believe that's giving away your sovereignty. No matter how hard the memory is, I encourage survivors to work through it consciously. And, even if you have to work on it 5 minutes at a time, once a day for 10 years, give yourself that 5 minutes and then, trust yourself that you can just stop working on the memory.
Yeah.
You can limit yourself and say, okay, for this time, I'm going to go there. And when that's done, I'm going to get up, I'm going to change positions, I'm going to go cook dinner, or I'm going to go out for dinner, or I'm going to call a friend, and I'm going to change positions. I'm going to separate myself from that memory work. And I'm just going to know and tell myself that, hey, you did good, you know? And even to the point where, there's some stuff where, I've worked through the majority of the memories and then it gets so horrific. But I've learned that it's okay. I can put up a boundary and I can say, you know what? There's some stuff that's so bad, I don't have to remember it. I don't have to work through it. I can just leave it. I can trust it into the Lord's hands.
Absolutely.
And I can give myself that permission to say, I don't have to remember that. I don't have to think about it. And that's okay.
And that is such trust, Jess. Sorry to chime in there, but I think what you're saying there is really the power in letting go and letting God is so immense, because what I'm seeing now, and I'm sure you would see it even more, is a lot of survivors are being triggered through whatever, and having memories and stuff. And I would imagine this must be so incredibly overwhelming for some people. And I don't know how, when my fiance was killed in a hijacking, I just remember saying as well, I don't know how people deal with death if they don't have a spiritual connection to God, and especially something that is so intense. So, at a time like this, I'm going to say the same thing. I think for starters, people coming out of any kind of abuse, particularly this SRA, because it's so aimed at abusing your spirit, that you need your spiritual connection with God in order to do it.
I love that you said that, that you brought that out, because it's so true that, and so I think, we need to be leery of any person that claims that they have all the answers, or that they can help you heal, or that they want to listen, to your story. Be very careful with that. And don't let anybody take away from you, that truth that we have a God who is our counselor. And is his counsel not professional enough? If anybody is trying to say that, oh, well, I've done so many years of this, so I'm a professional, I'm the expert, beware. We have a God who is, the expert, who knows exactly what's been done to our mind, our spirit, and who knows exactly what we need for healing.
Jess, I love that, because this was really what I was going to say, because when we establish that spiritual connection with God, people often ask me in my work I do, well, who do you see when you need to? I go, no one. I talk to God. And honestly, I have learned God is my bestie. Seriously. Right. I have learned to have that amazing connection where I know no matter what trouble I'm in or how uncomfortable it might be, as long as I'm freaking out, angry, lashing out, dying of pain or whatever, I am not going to hear the voice of God. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't go through those emotions. It really means I'm allowed to go through them and trust that God is holding me. And that when I've calmed down, I will hear God's voice. I will get guidance. And when we trust God, when we trust the voice of God, it's like a sense of peace fills us like nothing else. Yeah. And then God will send you the right therapist.
That's right. He does. And, like even I think back, when I got out at age 10, I, couldn't even go speak to a pastor about the things that had happened to me. I couldn't speak to a teacher. I couldn't speak to a school counselor. And what did the Lord do? I was at church one day, I was in the library, and all of a sudden the Lord points out, Corrie ten Boom's book. She was a Dutch clockmaker who went through World War II. Her and her family were imprisoned for hiding Jews. And the Lord used, the testimony, the story of this woman. It so resonated with my soul. And I ended up getting a hold of all of her books, throughout the years. And then the Lord started showing me all these missionaries' books. And, missionaries like Elizabeth Elliot, whose husband was horrifically murdered in the Amazon by the people there. But what's beautiful about that story is that, when her husband was murdered, it was actually all the men in their group were murdered. The women moved into the village of those who murdered their husbands and became the teachers and started providing medical care. And they lived among those individuals, and they ended up leading many of those people to Christ. So, it's this beautiful story called Beyond the Gates of Splendor. And so I think of things like that, who did the Lord choose to be my therapist? Indirectly, it was this woman who, suffered through World War II, was imprisoned, went through all sorts of torture, and, ended up later traveling the world, sharing her story. And, he didn't choose somebody who had been through all these years of so-called education and professional training. The Lord chose a simple little old woman who was vulnerable and, just said, okay, Lord, my story's hard. There's a lot of pain in my story, but here's my story. I'm going to share my story with the world. And someday that woman will know, what was the impact of her willingness to share her story. The Lord used it to bring healing to the successor to the Queen Mothers of Darkness. You think of just how amazing that is.
Wow.
Rebecca
That's
Brown,
incredible.
who's another one, Rebecca Brown, who, was a doctor who the Lord brought a bride of Satan into her life, and she helped this bride of Satan get out of the system. Her story of that encounter, that impacted my life, brought healing to someone chosen as a successor to the Mothers of Darkness, So I encourage people, don't be afraid to wrestle through your healing process and use it. If there's pictures that you've drawn, if there's things you've written, memories, poems, ask the Lord how you can use it, because He will use your story to impact others. And I think that's the difference, with these infiltrators. One, they will share their lives to an extent, but they will never get very personal. They won't really tell you about what their struggles, what their wrestlings, what the things they have to work through. On the outskirt, they look good. They look like they've got everything under control. They may say, oh, in the past I had this, but I'm healed now, but they're terrified to actually share those struggles and those wrestlings or their imperfections. So that's a real telltale sign.
Absolutely. And I think another thing is ego. The minute someone tells you they're the best at what they do and they're the only one who can help you here, and they're the ones, and that immediately is an issue. What I really, again, when you not in your truth, when you're not aligned with God, you are questioning, you are uncertain, you're fearful because you don't know what to do, and you want other people to tell you what to do and give you advice and say, you need to go to that person. We're beyond that now. And this is the thing, we've been deceived for so long by these guys. The average person on the street has no cooking clue. A lot of the people that have been programmed and coming out are still in some of the programs that they're in and can get hauled back in just as quickly by these guys.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like when we are in our spiritual truth and we really hear the voice of God speak to us, God will show us who the person is or the people are or the group is that you need to connect with. Mm-hmm. And if that dodgy person comes along and tries to haul you in there and tell you, I'm the therapist, you will smell that, man. All your intuition, because your intuition is actually your superpower. Our intuition is God's voice. When you connect it to your intuition, that's when you hear God. And you don't doubt that voice anymore. Or it's not even a voice. It's not masculine for me anyway. It's not even a voice. It's not masculine, neither is it feminine. It's this amazing just consciousness, a thought, an understanding, a knowing, a desire that just moves through me. And I know I've learned to hear God's voice very clearly. So that's what I'm saying. When you are trusting yourself and your alignment to God, you have no need whatsoever to fear whether you are seeing the right person. And very often, as Jessie was saying, God will lead you to the strangest people. It's not even going to be a therapist sitting in an office with $1,000 suit on. It's going to be some little old lady somewhere. You could walk past the grocery store and feel inspired to sit next to the homeless person on the bench. And if that's where you are led, you sit there and you just might be for 5 minutes. There's something that person says that might just unlock something in you. That's how God works. So we don't necessarily need therapy, but we need to listen to the voice of God.
And I think, the most powerful influences in my life have been exactly that, the most unexpected conversations sometimes, or, even, incidences where, I think back, in that early childhood years, the Lord specifically would put me in connection with elderly men or women that, several of them were part of this prayer group. One of them, his name was Skip. I just loved to sit and listen to this man pray. And why I loved it was because I was used to, the Catholic Church upbringing. I was used to people who talked at God. They had lots of requests. They had lots to say to God. But he would sit there and literally was in a conversation with the Lord. He would pause. There were moments where, he would turn to scripture. He would read it out loud and he would say, okay, Lord, I hear what you're saying. And that started to teach me about, wow, like it's not talking at God, like I can actually have a conversation with God. And, so people like that, or, there were times where, some of the early stuff the Lord was teaching me about prayer and healing. I used to, one of the churches I went to, they always had the doors open at 7 a.m. And I would go and I would walk, they had everything was built in a square in that church. So I would just walk the square hallway and I would sing, I would pray, I would worship the Lord, just have this beautiful morning with him every day. And I'd pray for all the staff in their offices. And the one pastor, it was really funny. Every time the Lord would stop me at his office door and would tell me to pray for his heart. And I'd be like, okay, Lord, but he doesn't have any heart issues. Like, I don't understand why you're having me pray about this, right? So, but this continued for over probably like a 3 to 5 year period where every time the Lord would tell me to pray for his heart. So then 15 years later, the Lord brings this individual back into my life. He was one of 2 pastors from my childhood who, you know, without me even knowing their connections to my seminary, they were alumni of my seminary and were actually there by God's divine appointment the day I graduated. So they got to watch me graduate from seminary as a chaplain. And so it was like a couple months after that, that all of a sudden his daughter sends a message one day and says, pray, you know, my dad has to go in for immediate bypass surgery. And the moment she said that, the Lord brought back those years and every single prayer praying for his heart. So I messaged her the story and said, hey, just remind your dad of, you know, he saw me walk in those halls every day for all those years. Let him know that the Lord told me back then, I was 15 years old when I started praying for him. I said, you tell him that the Lord told me to pray for his heart. So you tell him that heart is prayed up. And so he went into that surgery knowing it was prayed up. And he messaged back after and was like, you know, wow, I just can't even explain how good God is. And he knew I needed to hear that. And so just the irony of how God works sometimes, that he randomly puts people into our lives who, you know, make a difference, who, you know, raise us up in the faith, who believe in, you know, the calling, the ministry God's given us. And, you know, if we're willing to see that beauty, you know, it makes a huge difference. And sometimes it's people that we don't even, you know, expect. You know, we want to say that because we're Christian, that God only puts Christian people to grow our faith. But I will say that, you know, the people who are not Christian have sometimes been the people who've grown my faith the most. You know, sometimes the sweetest fellowship I've had with those who are completely opposite in their belief system. You know, whether it's Jehovah Witness or, you know, Hindu, whatever it is, even Satanists or Luciferians, you know, my proctor, you know, is somebody who my whole life was just extravagant in her evil. And yet, you know, when I was really willing to submit to the Lord and say, you know, I really just want to let her know that somebody in this world loved her in spite of all that evil, that, you know, every day of my life I cried out and said, God, let today be the day that she chooses not to do evil. And I had to come to that reconciliation, or that, you know, reconciliation within myself, to say that in spite of her evil, that I love her, you know, I love her, and I really want the best for her, that I didn't want her to continue in those things. And, you know, so the one day it was like, how can I encourage her? How can I show her love? You know, and it was like, well, maybe I could write her a letter, you know, let her know something I appreciate about her. But then I was like, God, there's nothing that I appreciate about her. You know, I couldn't think of anything. And I said, Lord, just give me one thing that I can thank you for about her. And it was funny because when I prayed that, all of a sudden the Lord brought to mind her marriage, that, you know, that she had remained faithful in her marriage, or I'll say had remained married for, you know, almost 70 years. So, you know, it's like, how beautiful is that? That's something that's noteworthy, to say, well, thank you for living that good example, you know. And, you know, publicly, that always looked like it was intact, you know. And,
Well, she birthed your mama.
yeah, well, here's the amazing thing about that. You know, I can't say that everything in her marriage was perfect, but at some extent, you know, they had lived in that cover life so long that there was that companionship between her and her husband. And, you know, the beauty was that in his old age, he got dementia and he came to the Lord, you know, a high-level Mason, and he came to the Lord. And in his dementia, he was very childlike, and he asked her to read her the Bible every night. Now, think of the irony of God working, that he has the Queen Mother of Darkness reading the Bible every night to her husband in his old age. I mean, God is just so good, you know? I mean,
God has such a sense of humor. We think
and
God does not have a sense of humor. Hello, look right here.
but the fact was that she loved him so much that she was willing to do that,
Wow.
you know?
Absolutely.
And so that even, you know, after all her years of service, she couldn't deny that request. And so
And
there's a beauty in that.
isn't it interesting that so often, you know, one would think about people such as her, who would arguably be one of the more evil people that inhabit the planet. One would imagine that all we see is she's about evil, destruction, blood, violence. Okay. Yet there she has this beautiful, soft place in her heart that loves her partner as we love our partners, you know, that has that softness, that kindness, that generosity in her, that sacrificed that part of herself for him, that she would read to him the very thing that she was taught to hate the most. And no doubt she was getting something out of that too. I have no doubt about that, whatever that may be, right? But it's not our place to judge, although I'd love to have like a little debate around that. Dig into what that could be about. You know me, I want to dig into everything. But it's very interesting that. And therefore, you know, it just shows you that she's, no matter how bad we might think people are. Again, I say this and I say this all the time, it's not our place to judge their contract with God. Your proctor has her contract with God for whatever that might be. And I think if God had to stand up and tell us what that might be, we'd be so surprised. We'd all be falling over backwards. Because I think it might be something a lot more beautiful than what any of us could ever imagine. So I love that, because I think that in itself says something. Just the fact that she was reading to him, the fact that she was willing to do that. She didn't get you or her daughter or hire a nanny or someone to do it. She did it. That was their time together with God, no matter what. And it's beautiful, because dementia really is about the old people going back to their fetal selves again, you know, their childlike self. So with her husband, just him going back to that childlike, infantile almost state before he crossed over, going back to his original true father, who's God. How beautiful is that? Honestly, guys, you know, when I hear stories like this, it's so incredible, because it just makes my heart melt. It just makes me realize when stuff like that is going on at these upper levels, where the Queen Mother of Darkness is reading the Bible to her husband, where in the world, where we don't ever even think about seeing that in the news. Only through you do we know that. So we know that God works in mysterious ways. We know that God has a way.
That the Lord used her to grow or increase his faith at that time. You know, it's like the Lord used one of the most evil people who doesn't have a relationship with him to grow her husband's faith during that time, you know?
And
so
if
how
God,
beautiful is that?
Exactly. And if God loves her despite everything she's done, okay, God still trusts her and loves her so much that he chooses her, the Queen Mother of Darkness, to read his word at her husband's end. Guys, when that is what is happening here, how dare we judge? Who are we to judge?
Right.
We have no place. Our place is to really say, welcome, we're waiting for you. You want to hear the word of God? You want to hear what's wonderful inside of you? You want to hear what's truly amazing within you? Let's talk.
Yeah.
You know? And that, Jessie, is such a beautiful thing. I mean, it really is. I know we've spoken about that before. You've mentioned that before. But, you know, for me, that has so many different layers of meaning, you know, that's at work there, that will filter through into the other areas, and people won't even know that it's happening, and they won't know where it's coming from. And meanwhile, while everyone's screaming and shouting and judging about your terrible proctor, yeah.
And it's, you know, it's probably, you know, the hardest place to get to, that when you're, you know, surrendered to the Lord and to his will, to that point where you can say, okay, Lord, you know, I know that you love the person who was my abuser, and I know that you desire them not to perish. You desire them to come to you. You desire them to be treated like a decent human being, even if they didn't treat others that way. You know, you still have a desire for good for them. And are we willing to, you know, submit to that desire for good? I encourage people to look up that book, Beyond the Gates of Splendor. You can even look up videos and see the actual videos of one of the men who murdered the missionary men. What is most beautiful about that story is that one of the murderers, you know, ended up becoming like a grandfather or a father to the son of the pilot that was murdered. And you know, later when they got to, you know, discuss that incident, what was interesting was that the man who murdered the pilot, he said to the son, he said, I watched them cross over. So he saw their spirits cross over, and that stuck with him. That you know, thing that he saw was what gripped his heart the most, you know, about the sin that he had done. And the son and the family, you know, of the man that he murdered forgave him, and they kept loving him. You know, they moved into his village. They kept treating him with respect, even though he had murdered somebody in cold blood, you know. And you know, and it's not to say that we don't need to put up boundaries against our abusers, but you know, and I'll admit there's some bad eggs out there. You know, even my proctor, um, many of those high level individuals in the system, they don't want redemption. They're part of that 5% that, you know, even when offered to them, they don't want it. You know, they're not looking for forgiveness. They're not looking for repentance. They don't have guilt or shame over the horrific things that they've done. They, in all honesty, they delight in that evil. And, you know, to just come to that place where we really take a look at other people's hearts, and, you know, what do we do with that? You know, what do we do with that? We're all responsible for what we do with that. You know, what would the Lord have us do? You know, we could treat them nasty, we could become their worst enemy, or we can be the biggest contender for their soul up until their very last breath. You know, and many of these people do come to the Lord at that very last moment when they're finally facing death. That's when they realize that they really don't want hell. Um, you know, they don't want to be separated from God for eternity, and they want to know God. And so, but we have to be willing to enter that race and contend with them up until that last moment, and it's not for everybody. It's a hard position to walk in, because you're still dealing with the vast extent of evil, and you have to be very strong in your boundaries,
Absolutely. Wow, Jess, thank you so much for your wisdom, your grace, your knowledge, just for being you and sharing and teaching and communing with us here again today. I know we've had a double whammy, so I say thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our viewers for tuning in and watching and supporting our channel. Really appreciate it. We're on Soulutions with Aquarius Rising Africa now, so if you haven't already, please give us a like, a share, and a subscribe on Aquarius Rising Africa 2 as well. We're migrating over to Rumble. Morne will put all the links here, so please connect with us on Rumble, because we're definitely going to be going more and more across Rumble in the next couple of weeks, months, whatever, because of course YouTube has a fun day slapping our wrists around every corner and taking our recordings down and threatening us. I think Elon needs to buy YouTube. That's what needs to happen. Elon needs to buy YouTube.
You should send him a message on Twitter, Chantelle. Tell him he needs to buy YouTube, that you're tired of being censored on here, and he'll be the first one you bring on the show.
I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to send Elon a message. I'll tell him you recommended that we do that, right?
You do that. Let's see how that goes.
I'm a South African and he used to trade with you, so what's the problem, dude? Come for us.
Include me in the notification. I would love that.
I will. I most definitely will. I'm going to. Don't think I won't. You're not going to be hearing from me sometime today. Best to be prepared for this.
Right. Oh anyway. My gosh, so funny.
Jess, would you mind closing for us in prayer, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for our discussion today. And I just lift up each individual out there today who is navigating their healing journey in their life. And we ask for full healing. We ask that we would walk forward in that healing journey with no fear, that we would not worry, we would not be afraid of who we can trust. Help us to know exactly how you want us to work through these things, Lord. I pray for each one that you would give them wisdom, direction, and discernment to know how to take care of their bodies, their minds, their spirits in a way that brings you so much joy and glory. And I just ask that you would continue to help us to be bold and to set up boundaries, but at the same time to not be afraid to just be who we are, to live and to enjoy the journey that you have us on. And I pray that you would also help us to have that healing, that it wouldn't just stop with us, but that as we're healed, that healing would extend out to other people who are also struggling. Help us to be mindful of our brothers and our sisters and the journeys that they're on as well. So we ask this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Well, blessings.
Sure. Thank you, beautiful Jessie, so much. It's always such a pleasure to have you for a double dose. But we shall see you again next week, same time, same place. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to our beautiful viewers for always tuning in and always having such cool things to say. God bless you all. Take care of yourself. Well, good morning, everybody. Here in Africa. Good evening, New Zealand. Good afternoon in wherever you are. I mean, I love this. We're so international. We're all over the show. It's really, really, really good to have you back with us, Gloria Masters, all the way from New Zealand, here on Soulutions with Aquarius Rising Africa. So welcome back, beautiful lady. How are you? How have you been?
Oh, thank you so much. It's so awesome to be back, and I really appreciate you extending that invitation. Hey, look, I've been great. I'd love to have more time and be able to develop more content, but until I get some really good donations or sponsorship, I have to work as well. So.
That's just, you know what, the way I see work though, it's just, for me, long ago, I understood the concept of do what you love and love what you do. So I get up every morning just so excited because usually I'm speaking to amazing people like yourself. Today, there's a whole lot of them lined up. And I'm like, wow, I'm speaking to so-and-so and I'm doing this and yoga in the morning. I got a client that comes 3 times a week and we have the best time before I start my day. So I think, it really, for me, is such an enjoyable process, this, and especially the last 2 years, I have to say, because even though it's been crazy and all of these things, we've really discovered some hidden truths, and I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. I've met people like yourself and beautiful Carmen Studer in the chat. She likes my background. Wait, this background is going to get painted purple one of these days. I just want to tell you. It's a room divider that a guy made from me from, what do you call it, slats. And
Yes.
I love it. He recycles. I'm going to paint it purple, but thank you. Oops. So anyway, it's just a beautiful time, and I'm very happy to be alive and really, really happy to have you, Gloria, because if our viewers have watched our previous talks, I've interviewed Gloria once before, maybe 2 months ago now. Also a survivor and overcomer of these horrors, but really just such an incredible healer, done some amazing things in terms of healing after that, which is really, really beautiful. And we look forward to having regular interviews with you now, Gloria, where we're going to be talking about more and more of these things as well. So you've written a book, and I wonder if Mornay can just pop the cover up. There we go. Flight Path to Healing. Maybe before we carry on, you can just tell us a little bit about this book and where can people get hold of it?
Thank you. Great question. So this is Flight Path to Healing, and I wrote this book because I couldn't see anything out on the market that spoke to me in a really pragmatic, experiential way. And after having 16 years of child sexual abuse involving many horrendous experiences, I felt that it might be useful for me and other survivors actually to have a little bit of a flight path. And so what it means is you can pick the book up at any place during the book, and it's divided into sections. So one section and one area you and I are looking at tonight or today for you guys is dissociation, but there are many hallmarks for us. So I go through what they are and offer little tips and techniques and practical exercises. And there's also mantras in the book that I've created that are able to be removed from the book, and beautiful color images that you can actually put up in a bedroom mirror or in a car console that speak to you. So it's a flight path theme. And so you start with a boarding pass. Well, Chantelle, for every child survivor of child sexual abuse, you've already got the boarding pass because you've survived what you have. So we start with that and we move through to the end, which is an amazing passport for survivors, and they get a lifetime honour degree and yeah, well deserved. So lots of experiential and practical techniques and solutions. Soulutions.
There you have it. And I have to tell you, I still think, I think her name was it, I can't remember now. I have written it down in my other book. One of our viewers actually said to us, because we just used to be Solutions, and one of our viewers suggested we call ourselves Soulutions. So we took up the suggestion, and then Mornay, I must say, was very quick. I said, oh yeah. And within a day we had our stuff changed, because it really is. I love it, because it is the time now for us to look within. There is so much beauty within, and we have no idea unless we actually go there. So with your book as well, and I know we're going to be going through it, certain parts of it as we go along as well, but today we want to look at the hot topic, and it really is a hot topic, of dissociation, which I know a lot of survivors have brought to the fore. I think we've spoken to Jessie about that as well, a number of our other overcomers, which I think is also what a similar or the same diagnosis as a few years ago we'd be calling split personality, right? Is it the same thing?
Not at all. And I think it's really a really good point you make. Dissociation is referred to as the process of disconnecting from your thoughts, feelings, and reality. And as survivors of child sexual abuse or trauma, we tended to leave our bodies and look back in on ourselves, usually from above. You'll hear most survivors say from up on the ceiling. And the reason we did that is it was actually a beautiful mind. You talk about going within. It was our beautiful minds working in conjunction with our spirit to keep us safe. We couldn't deal with what was happening, Chantelle. So the mind leapt in and said, I've got you. Isn't that beautiful? And therefore removed us from the full experience of it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. And so, look, I'm so grateful for my mind. My mind kept me removed from all of this for 16 years. And I was in my 30s before the recall began, because then the mind was ready to say, hey, Gloria, it's your time. And my response was, F off. I don't want to deal with anything. But of course you have to. Now, the problem with dissociation now, Chantelle, in my humble opinion, is that for us, for survivors, we may still dissociate, yeah, because we learned to. And so as an adult, we actually need to be more connected. So dissociation served us, but perhaps the question to your beautiful viewers is, do you still need that to the same extent? Because you may not.
Yeah.
And so,
what would be, obviously, I think what I would in my mind say, like, when you were mature enough to deal with the trauma, your mind knew that. Intuitively, you knew that. So you kind of brought it up to the fore, like was that boil that was now coming to the surface, right? Where you were able to lance, squeeze, and then heal, because we know healing is a messy business. It's painful. It's hurtful. You know, we've got to go into places where, gosh, I can't imagine what you must have felt like going back there again.
Oh, it was without doubt one of the worst times of my whole life. And I had 16 years of it. So I didn't have a couple of memories surfacing. It was thousands. And Chantelle, the more horrendous, because you've got to remember there was satanic ritual abuse, there was gang initiations, there were pornographic movies I was exploited in, chained up and leased out of a nightclub in our red light district. I had so many memories that were coming through. It was like a tsunami. And it was actually almost as frightening as being there. And I think for survivors, what dissociation does when we finally start to be able to deal with it, it kept us so safe and protected that when it starts to emerge in us, it's simply because it's our mind's way of saying, hey, I'm here and you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And
what would,
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you want to say anything else?
Well, just that its key characteristic is its strong link with childhood trauma, and it's one of the most common signs, actually. And I think people who are non-survivors often say, well, how can that be true if you've repressed it or your mind hasn't let you see it? So a good response, Chantelle, is a car accident. For any of the people trying to support a survivor, think of it this way. If you have a car accident, chances are you're not going to remember that for a while, depending on the severity of the accident, right? So you might wake up in hospital a week, 2 weeks, a month later and have no real recollection. Thank you, dissociation. Thank you, mind. You protected me from that trauma.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it really, like as in everything else, it's really just instead of my mind has blocked it off, it's thank you for protecting me and not showing me what I wasn't ready to see and deal with. Again, everything in the form of gratitude, the whole gentle opening. And then I would imagine that as you open up, the mind will then only release that which you are capable of dealing with in that moment, even though it might seem very traumatic and you might be shell-shocked out of your wits for a little bit. But somehow you will find your way back because you do feel there's a sense of safety within you to deal with that. And that, I think, is something, that sense of safety, as a healer for 20 odd years as well, I find that's a very important aspect for healing. People need to feel that they are safe in their bodies. Because if you look at, especially people like yourself who've undergone horrific traumatic experiences, your body was the thing that was most abused, most violated, most just, wow. So it's about learning how to feel safe in your body so that you don't feel the need to dissociate. I say disassociate. I don't know, I'm probably saying it wrong. But
syllable, you're fine.
We'll just make it our own.
Make up a new word.
But that's what I'm saying. So what would you say when someone starts getting memories, like you explained? How do they start feeling safe in their body again?
Yes, and that's a really useful path, actually, Chantelle. It's by actually being very gentle with oneself and recognizing that we are always, but always heading to healing and light. Mm-hmm. We are always moving on that path. So if the memories and the flashbacks start, it's simply because you're being shoulder tapped to face in. Now, it's going to feel terrible. We can't sugarcoat it, but we do know this. If you block it and try and stop it, which I did initially, it's got this habit of not diminishing, but actually coming back stronger. So what began as a shoulder tap might become a shove. If you ignore that, you're going to get hit in the face. If you're still going to try and ignore it, you're going to get shoved so hard, you've got no choice but to face in. So 2 things help. 1, reminding yourself, and I always say this to people, look at your hands. So look at the palm of your hands, and if you even look at yours and I look at mine, Chantelle, they are an adult's hands. You are an adult. This is not happening now. You are safe and you are being led to healing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That would be definitely the first, because really the only person that can pacify you is yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you can have a million people around you telling you this, telling you that. All we can do is offer you guidance to get to the place. But ultimately, you've got to be the one that sits. And I mean, my favorite Bible verse of all time is be still and know that I am God. You know, just to sit in that place and just know that you are created from the divine source, the divine creator, and you are loved. And if you are breathing and your heart is beating, there's a reason for you to be here. You never know what your future holds for you. You never know. I mean, look at you, Gloria, what you went through, and look at you today, you know, having come through such a horrific experiences, and then now writing a book and helping people who've been through what you've been through. We never know what our life has in store for us. So I think that would be the first thing. Something that I think is also very important is that people start to exercise. I'm a yogini, okay, and I know not everyone agrees with yoga, but for me and some of my students that I've worked with also more recently as well, it's about feeling in control of your body, feeling strength in your body. You know, when we like, let's say, do a practice of yoga, you know, you learn to build strength. You learn to understand how to work the mind and body combination. So it builds strength, it builds confidence, it builds connection. And when we start feeling strong in our body, we can somehow start feeling as if we're in control in a much greater way, because that was what was violated, right? Where you had no control.
Yes.
So maybe to start taking steps. And if you don't like that stuff, maybe just walking, smelling the air, you know, stretching, lifting your arms and being aware and turning your head of the miracle that is your body.
I love what you're saying. Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, I'm done. I'm actually done. Thank you.
Okay. I love what you're saying, because one of the key mitigating factors or one of the key things that helps bring us back into our bodies is what we call the 5 senses exercise. And so what it is we get some lavender and smell it. Notice a tree and look intently at the bark on that tree, or have a bite of an apple. You know, touch something. It might be a rock on the beach, but engaging the 5 senses grounds us and brings us back into our body, because we got into the habit of being dissociative. And moving that body and breathing and all of those really cool components are so valuable. And another thing that you had mentioned, and I just want to add to, is this: when the voice is on the inside, or the voice on the inside is louder and more powerful than the voices on the outside, you have mastered your life.
Absolutely. And that's a very amazing feeling to feel. And I love what you said there, you know, the 5 senses exercise, because I think that's exactly where one begins. Is like just to appreciate tasting.
Yes.
Ask anyone who's had this funny spiky flu thing lately. And many people have lost their taste. I mean, one of my friends said to me, it's like he was trying to eat a piece of cheese, I think he said. He said it was like a salt block in his mouth.
Yeah.
He said, you can just imagine. I mean, I've never lost my taste. So just to appreciate, I love food, so I just can't imagine what would happen to me if I lost my taste. I'd be devastated, I'll tell you that much.
We're not going to do that to you, Chantelle.
I hope not.
There are other things with dissociation as well, you know, and I think it's really important we do that. Moving the body is crucial, and I love that you brought that up. I think it's also, you know, making sure that we ground ourselves in our body by looking at it and noticing it and recognizing we are in the here and now. And man, you deserve such honor, people. You survived this and you're here today. And you know, I don't think sometimes as survivors we give ourselves enough credit or acknowledgement actually for emerging through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is. I mean, it's that appreciation of the body. You know, I always say, when you're in the shower and you wash your arms, just thank your arms for hugging and holding, your hands that touch and feel, your eyes that see, your nose that smells, your knees that bend, your flexible fingers. Gosh, anyone who's been in pain or has any sort of physical disability can really understand and appreciate what it feels like to have a fully functional body, right? So the more we appreciate what the body is, you know, there's something I always say, your cells are listening. The more we talk and appreciate, you as a human being know, I mean, anyone who's in a work career, when you appreciate it in the role you're playing and you are valued, you shine, you radiate. You know, you enjoy what you're doing, you're putting energy in and you're getting appreciated, you grow, you bloom. Exactly the same thing with your body. So just to learn how to appreciate my hands that are flexible. I don't care that the bank manager's on your back right now. In this moment, your hands are flexible. You can smell, you can touch. Wow, wow, the sun's shining. What a miracle.
Yes.
You know, it's starting with the little things. And, you know, we are so prone to looking at ourselves with criticism, especially as we grow older, right? The cellulite sets in, the boobs start sagging, you know, the wrinkles start, and it was like, oh my gosh, look at photographs of me when I was 20. Can you believe that's what I looked like when I was 20? I'm going, well, you're 60 now. I think it's normal that you've aged a little bit, don't you think? You know, so it's understanding and appreciating rather than looking at the external. It's appreciating the fact that you can breathe, that your heart is beating, that you're here, that you're alive. You know, these are little things I think that people can start just doing, and not just high level traffic people. I'm talking about everyone has their path to walk. Your experience might be very different, but it can have a very hectic effect on you. So if that, you know, if you are having these kind of symptoms where you feeling disassociated, where you're feeling anxious, where you're feeling depressed, whatever, it's really just a beginning to understand that the power and the light is within you. Just start doing the little things that make a difference to yourself.
100%. And also, you know, we need to acknowledge as well that actually every human being on the planet dissociates, Chantelle. We just do it to a smaller or larger degree. And I'll give you an example of this. You know, you and I included, there's people that we're going to be listening to at times, and really we're just thinking, please stop talking. And our mind takes us to the shopping list. You know, enough now, shut up, sort of thing. But we smile and nod, but we've dissociated from it because we've now written a shopping list in our head. Yeah, so every human being does
and
that.
I'm sitting like this with my phone.
Yeah. And so we do that. But what we're talking about is on a continuum, dissociation's on a continuum. And for some of our survivors, they may have dissociated through what happened to them, and thank heavens they did. But sometimes, depending on you know, what makes us all individual is our makeup, is that they may have gone right to the end of dissociative amnesia, which is kind of quite at the severe end. And again, it was designed to help us, but my question back now is it actually helping you now? Because if you find you're distracted, if you find you lose time, think about driving somewhere, Chantelle. Can you honestly say you always know how you got from A to B? Or are you suddenly home and you think, oh my gosh, you dissociated. So there's a part of you that stayed conscious, but there's a part of you that wrote your next blog or book or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So true.
I think we need to normalize dissociation to some extent, because what we find in survivor land is we get labeled with so many things, and the reality is there's always a way through. And there's a wonderful saying that good or bad, it's equally welcome. And by that I mean we either appreciate what's come our way because it quantified or qualified what we were thinking, or we don't appreciate it because we needed to learn something. So either way, we can be grateful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, everything is an opportunity for us to look a little deeper, I think. And, you know, sometimes I find if we change the word grateful to appreciate, because sometimes if we're thinking vibrations of words, because remember, the frequency in us is what manifests around us. So if we're trying to be grateful for something that we're not really feeling grateful for, that can sometimes be counterproductive. But if we can say, well, I'm not grateful that my father beat me up, but I can appreciate that it taught me how to smell out a con man or a man with addictions or violence or whatever. I can appreciate the lesson. So if we start with appreciation, it's not as daunting as grateful. I'm not grateful I was in the system and abused for 50 years, but I can appreciate that I saw so much that no one can ever pull the wool over my eyes again. And I can appreciate that that experience has given me the tools to write an amazing book. So I think if we can just not force ourselves to feel anything we're not ready to feel, because that is something so counterproductive. Because now we're seeing the world is smiling and all the survivors are out there and happy and married with children. Here I am. No, that's probably not what you're meant to be seeing. You know, then we start comparing ourselves.
No, it's simply that what I've learned is that for me, I'm always exactly where I'm meant to be.
Yes, absolutely.
Every second of my life. Do I always value it or appreciate it? No. But it's not until I look back, Chantelle, and then I realise, there was that lesson. Had I not been in that situation that I didn't appreciate or want to be in, I would not have learned that. So I guess that's what I'm really thinking. I'm not, look, it's a really complex terrain that we need to navigate. And I always think with survivors, one size definitely doesn't fit all. And through the flight path to healing, the guide, it's your flight path. You choose your destination. Just like if you're going on a journey or a trip somewhere, Chantelle, you plan where you want to go. You plan where you want to stop off. You plan who you want to see. And it's the same with this. It really, to me, it's choice. Gives survivors a choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as you say, it's very important. One size doesn't fit all. It's about an experiential thing, which is a really beautiful journey. And it's really, as painful as what healing can be, and it is, because it's like taking that scab off and cleaning the wound, right? And your mom puts Bernie stuff and you go, ow, 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 stop, stop, stop,
Yes.
That's really kind of what this is about. So I really think it's just about people being very gentle with themselves, as you say, learning tiny baby steps at a time is beautiful. But what I actually wanted to ask you, we said we were speaking about the difference between split personality and disassociation. Because let's say, for example, in your experience, at a very early age, you disassociated because of the violence and the trauma. So these aspects of yourself kind of learn how to, they've got a mind of their own. Would you agree? So how does one then bring that back into a place of balance? And what would it just be blocking out for a moment, or would it be taking on another persona for a moment? You see what I'm saying? That would be the split or sort of multiple personality, because would multiple personalities not stem from this in many situations?
Look, and it can, and I don't know enough about dissociative identity disorder or that MPD, multiple personality disorder. But what I do know is this: I don't tend to call it split personality. I'm very appreciate that that didn't happen to me. But what did happen, and what this may speak to you, Chantelle, was I was so disintegrated. My personality was scattered everywhere because I had to endure so much. My mind had to cut off so much that in order to be accepted by people, depending on what area I was in, whether it was with my good Catholic mother when I stayed at her house, or my satanic pedophile father, and behave differently there, and then again behaving differently at school. So I had many split off aspects. I was so disintegrated that a lot of my healing journey was about reintegration and accepting those parts of myself and trying to bring them in, because who you see is integrated. But it took decades. It took decades for me to integrate and be authentic, because who I wasn't ever accepted, you see.
Are you saying that in your particular situation, you didn't necessarily have different aspects of yourself at play, or shifting in and out of parts of yourself, so to speak, but you just withdrew, is what I'm hearing, right? Is that I'm trying to understand how this plays itself out for different people. And the reason I'm asking is because as someone who hasn't had this kind of thing occur, I would love to know how the person on the street would recognize in a compassionate way that someone who has, and how do we assist that? That's kind of like the thread of my question. How do we as humanity create a compassionate space by recognizing dissociation when we see it?
Yeah, so dissociation, when you see it, you will see it in people because there are either comments are made like they're too good to be true, or they're abusing drugs and alcohol, or there's always a problem in their lives. And so there's not a sense of balance or peace.
Yes.
When I talk about disintegration, what I'm trying to say is for survivors, we were not accepted for who we were, which is beautiful, young, innocent children. So in my case, I then chose to be and use a false self, which was the smiling, people-pleasing, engaging, gold medal award-winning, perfect person in all situations. Yeah.
So you really just played, you had this one kind of role, dual role that kind of was, not a dual role, sorry, that's the wrong word. Just one, I don't even know what the word is, but one face, but it was a broad one that could cover.
Yeah,
yes.
think of a masked ball. So I had a mask in front of me. All anyone ever saw was the mask.
Mask, yeah.
It was never safe for me, and there was no permission from either parent to be me, but they would accept the mask.
Yeah.
So can you imagine the pain and trauma then for me as a survivor and potentially other survivors? If you're not accepted for who you are, you adapt, because as children we adapt. And if that means we become disintegrated, or some people, as you pointed out initially, they do have dissociative identity disorder, or they do have multiple personalities, and that help keep them safe. And, you know, it just takes years, I think, for all of that to come back into wholeness and healing.
Yeah,
very painful, very, very painful.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay. So, yeah, I think it's, you know, for me as well, you know, what the main thing I think that I would like to understand is that we can recognize that in the other, but I guess we're not going to do that until we've healed ourselves. I mean, that's what I teach all the time. You know, when we're in a place of compassion, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it was so interesting the other day, and I have to tell you this, I mean, this was just me. There was someone who reached out to me on WhatsApp and sent me a message, and I reached out, and then sent this very bizarre message, and then I sent her another message. Wow, the next minute she comes back and hurls the most hectic abuse at me. You effing bitch. You with your yoga poses and your Cape Town photos. I'm like, what are you talking about? She says, and I'm the cause, and I'm like abusing my spiritual gifts, and I'm a demon. Yes, I've got a demon, and she sees my demon, and I'm like, wow. But you know, and I just said to her, Angel, you need to calm down, take a breath, and then maybe it's better you delete my number. That was my response to her. You know, whereas usually I'd go, oh my gosh, this woman's in cloud cuckoo land, you know. But understanding really that what good does it help to fight and be nasty to someone like that who is clearly very tortured already? And I think that for me was a big lesson, because I was able to not take that on personally, because there was no ways that I had done anything on a personal level. I was being kind, you know. She didn't like that. And she sees me as being someone who's very rich and she has no money. And that's the problem. And whatever money she gets, she spends on marijuana and alcohol. So that's, and I understand that. So what is the point of giving someone shit, excuse my language, and being a real bitch back when, as I said, they clearly are in a state of despair? So for me, that I think would be a big thing, is that we can recognize that there are people out there who we have no idea what has happened in their lives. And when this craziness comes out of nowhere, not to react to it, just to understand that there's a lot of that out there, and maybe offer a word of kindness in return, not from a sanctimonious point of view, but really from a heart point of view.
Well, it's an interesting thing that you raise, and I think a couple of things about it. One is, yes, compassion can always and should always be used, but equally so do setting boundaries. So I love that you say you asked you to lose your number. Why? Because once we let that into our energetic field, you know, there's good and there's not good out there in terms of what comes through. So,
totally.
And then I think the other thing is that, you know, for someone who clearly was using a lot of projection, so the demon she's projecting on you was clearly residing within. And what we find in this space is that, of course, survivors, and she will have been through whatever, but we also always have a choice, don't we? There's free will. And,
absolutely.
And look, I can have a shit day like you can, like anyone can. Am I going to take it out on you? No.
Yeah.
Because what does that do? And I think perhaps that's more healing, but you know, we can be compassionate, but we also have to be quite clear, because as survivors, Chantelle, we had to take so much that it's a real struggle for us sometimes to be able to set those boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, and the other thing is, the key thing actually was this, and I heard it the other day. I'd love to know what you think. Stop telling people, this is the saying, stop telling people how great they are when they're dysregulated or struggling with trauma. All they can't actually absorb about how great they are. All they really want to hear is that they're safe.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, even I mean, me, as people, you know, there were times that I'd go through a really rough time, and my friends, some of my best friends would say to me, "You're strong. You can handle this." And all I wanted to do was, no, at this moment, come around and have a coffee. Sit for 10 minutes and chat and ask me how I'm doing and what's bugging me. You know, it really is so true. I absolutely agree with that. You're great. You're a winner. Absolutely say wonderful things. And I really admire your strength, because you're doing what I certainly don't think I could be doing. So there's ways to say things, you know. There's also ways to say things. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Obviously, you want to encourage the person, but you don't want to give them this false bravado. Speak from your heart and say, wow, I think I absolutely admire your journey. I know I have no idea how I would handle that. I'm praying for you. Whatever. You know, stuff like that might be really good, but not, you're wonderful, you got this, you're strong, you can do this.
No, I think, and the interesting thing is, the good news is we have body language, which is our most powerful communication tool. If you're telling someone how great they are and they're starting to edge away from you, or they're not looking happy, they're not feeling able to hear that. There's stuff
Yeah.
going on for them. So I just thought it
Absolutely.
was quite a useful thing to hear, actually, because I'm guilty of that. I'll thank the sky for being available. You know, I'll give an award to the guy who posts the mail. You know, like that's who I am. But the result, the point is that you know, not everyone can hear that, and it can feel a little bit intrusive when they're struggling.
Absolutely.
So I love what you said before. It's the gentleness, it's the compassion, it's actually letting people be where they need to be and just honouring everybody individually where they are, because it's
Absolutely.
their flight path, isn't
Absolutely.
it, Chantelle? Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to just see the chats here, other than a whole lot of porn dating sites that are trolling our chat room.
Yes.
And everyone's porn dating sites here, not us. But
How
anyway.
appropriate today, Chantelle, you're interviewing a child sexual abuse, sex trafficking survivor.
Yeah, like, okay. And you can't even block these disgusting things.
No.
Anyway. I actually like her from Liz Danette, I think that's how you pronounce it. She just says, I struggled with the words grateful and thankful. I appreciate the new outlook. Absolutely. You know, the day that I started saying to myself that I stopped trying to force myself to be grateful that I wasn't really grateful for, I started changing the narrative in my head. And I just understood how to start looking at the appreciation and the gentleness. And if I don't feel like doing something right now, you know, I'll do it in 10 minutes if I really have to. But, you know, it's just fine. I'll set my 3 tasks for today. And when I achieve them, mission occurred, mission accomplished, you know. So I think that's great. I just want to see if there's anything here. Yeah, there was a book, Body Keeps the Score, and I found out my husband was... Yeah, what happened to you? What happened? Sorry, yes, she's saying, I found out that what my husband was into my body and mind experienced my past memories. Had that happened to your guest?
I'm not quite sure.
So what she's saying is the body keeps the score. So by sort of delving into the body, did you go, and I'm thinking that's what she's saying, and my mind experienced my past memories. So by going into the body, she started experiencing past memories, past lives, maybe stuff like that. And she's asking if you've actually experienced anything like that.
No, just the trauma. Just the trauma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carmen loves the accident illustration. I like that as well because it's very, very pertinent. Where if you see it's a physical trauma as well as a mental, as well as an emotional, it's one heck of a trauma, really. I can't imagine how any human being can come out of that happy, sane, alive, but yet, yeah, you are beautiful, Gloria. So, okay, well, I don't know if there's anything else you would just like to end because I see we're just about out of time. So if there's anything you'd like to say, just in closing to our viewers before we bid you guys farewell.
Oh, thank you. Look, you know, trusting self is a big part of this because we learn to doubt ourselves because we were so invaded and disregarded through all of this process. And I think just trust in your instinct because you know the truth and you know how you felt. Oh, and if anyone wants the book, gloriamasters.com, or it's on Amazon as well.
We'll post all the links to your books and your everything in the description section below. So check it out. Mornay has posted the link as well for your book in the comment section. Maybe Mornay, you can just post it one more time before the end, so that if anyone has missed it from before, it's always telling me how strong I am. Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce Maingwankwe. Maingwankwe. That sounds like an African name. They told me that all the time when I had cancer, always telling me how strong I was. It would upset me too. It's true. And I know people mean well. It really is true. And I'm glad this has come up because I know people mean well when they say that. you know, you're strong, you can do this, you know, this, that. But sure, just sometimes we just want to be held and just hugged and say, it's okay, let me make you a cup of soup or a meal. So doesn't matter. Let's not talk about that now. Let me show you some kindness. So yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay.
So
Okay, guys.
So are you.
Oh, and you. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this amazing conversation with this very, very special lady, Gloria Masters from New Zealand. And we will be having her back as a regular. We're going to be talking about all sorts of things that she's experienced on her healing journey and that she's written books on and shared and counseled with others. So please join us. Watch the space. We will let you know exactly what timing we're going to be doing it as. And in the meantime, God bless you all. See you very, very soon. We're back this afternoon with Jessie on Aquarius Rising Africa. And yeah, love to see you all again soon. Take good care of yourselves. See you soon. Like, share, and subscribe. You guys know about all of these things. Like, share, note. All the platforms, we're there. Find us. Thank you.